Call the meeting to order, and we'll begin with the adoption of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Chairman Peters,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hayman,
Aye.
Director Griffin,
Aye.
Director Itmeyer,
Aye.
Director Vallejo. Motion carries.
Okay, our next item is public comment on closed session. Is there anyone wishing to comment on the closed session agenda? Not seeing any, we'll adjourn to closed session. Okay, we will now resume open session, and we'll start with a report on closed session.
There we go. Thank you, Chairman. The board met in closed session on 3 items. There's no reportable action from the board in closed session, but there are some litigation items that we should report out. One, as everybody probably is aware by now, shortly after our last board meeting, the California Supreme Court declined to take the appeal of Mojave Pistachios on the pay first, litigate later ruling. So that matter is now over. Secondly, at the last meeting, we had quite a bit of discussion about de minimis wells and getting them representation. There was some comments at that meeting that maybe there will be some changes in those that are objecting to de minimis wells having class counsel. That has not occurred as of yet. There is a hearing on Friday. No motion has been made to provide class counsel to de minimis wells yet. There is no motion to exclude them from the effects of the adjudication. So all of the considerations from last month are still valid. And if you have a de minimis well, you should definitely consider getting yourself involved in the litigation. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Our next item is the Pledge of Allegiance. Salute.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And roll call.
Chairman Peters,
Here.
Vice Chair Hayman,
Present.
Director Griffin,
Here.
Director Itmeyer,
Here.
Director Vallejo.
Present.
Okay, thank you. Next item is public comment. This time is reserved for the public to address the board about matters not on this agenda. No action will be taken on non-agenda items unless authorized by law. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Is there anyone that would like to speak under public comment?
Good morning, Judy Decker. I note that we have spent a lot of time discussing the pipeline project, and in fact are well on our way to having a design for that pipeline. What concerns me, and I've stated this before, is I note there is, again, nothing on the closed session agenda about water rights and the GA acquiring those water rights. And that is of grave, great concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hall, would you like to?
Yeah, Chairman, to respond to that, we've moved water rights off of this closed session because there's nothing really new to discuss in the development. We are well into acquiring those rights at this stage. It's been on multiple closed sessions prior to this, but there was nothing really new development to discuss at this meeting, so we didn't place it on there, and there was no discussion of it. But water rights acquisition is well underway.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Okay, seeing none on the floor, we'll go to the phones. Go ahead, caller. Go ahead, caller.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. This is Mike Neal. just wanted to comment on what I have heard when I listened to the video of the last meeting sometime last week, and all the supposed quote-unquote interchange and discussion about whether the water district was trying to shut out private well owners from any kind of representation in the adjudication lawsuit. A rather long-winded set of statements, I guess you'd call it. Paul, who supposedly is an employee of this board, yet took it on himself to pretty much attack the integrity of one of the board members, which being the water district, and on and on with all that, which was later refuted quite clearly and made totally clear to the public that the water district foresees in no case are the de minimis well owners going to get their water rights shut off. But that's been the attempt to present to the public, certainly in that case by Mr. Hall. But I would like to say that actually this has been the one time in all these years that I agree with Mr. Hall when he said that the relationship between the GA board and the water district was fractured. And I would thoroughly agree with that. I think it's been fractured for some time. All the GA board is doing with the water district is using them as the sole source of funding to continue their operations, yet time after time put up their employees or even sometimes there are other board members to try to slander the water district to make them look like the bad guys in this whole water thing, when the whole time they're the only body, number one, that's been elected to deal with water issues, who actually represent the people. GA board having two basically out-of-town members getting a vote to dictate to us our water rights. So I'd say yes, GA has fractured the relationship with the water district and the water users in this valley, and it's time for the water district to help the people in this valley do what's necessary to send the GA packing and get them out of here and get their hands out of our water business. That's all.
Okay, thank you. And just for clarification, I believe Director Griffin is an elected member of the Water District. Director Heyman is an elected member of the City Council, and I'm an elected member of the Board of Supervisors, and we're all trying to deal with this. So just to clarify that. Are there any other callers on the phone? Go ahead, caller.
Hello, this is Renee Westerlusk. I just have some information type things that I don't know if any of the GA board members or the attorneys representing the GA are aware of, but there's other things going on, and I just wanted to bring them up real quick and then let you know I have articles on these I could forward to the board if you're interested in reading about them. But one is about a state pension plan in Arizona has been helping a Middle Eastern firm export Arizona's precious groundwater. That's one topic. Another is there's the groundwater agency, I guess, that's over Delano is suing them for recruiting to their area bottling plant. And then there's an article in the Bakersfield Californian about the state reports first increase in groundwater supplies in 4 years. I kind of just wanted to know if you're aware of these issues and if anybody wants to look at the articles.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, if you'd like to send those over to April, I'm sure she'd be happy to share those with the board.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other callers? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to item 7, which is board member comments. Are there any comments from the board? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to item number 8, which is consent agenda, and that includes items 8A and items 8B, 1 through 4. Is there any public comment on the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for any comments or a motion.
Motion to approve.
Okay,
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Have a motion and a second.
Chairman Peters,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hayman,
Aye.
Director Itnire,
Aye.
Director Griffin,
Aye.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. That takes us to item number 9, excuse me, public workshop, groundwater sustainability plan, periodic review and update. I'll turn that over to Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Am I on? I'm on. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Steve Johnson with Stetson Engineers. We're the Water Resources Manager. With me today is Jeff Helsley. You all know Jeff, and Helena. A lot of you have seen Helena on the Zoom calls that we've had, but Helena's worked a lot on this workshop and working on a lot of projects associated with the Groundwater Authority. So anyway, it's good to see everybody. It's still morning, so good morning. We haven't been up here for a while. It's great to be here and see everybody again. Jeff's going to walk through the workshop PowerPoint, and then I think we'll open up for questions and discussion. So go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you, Steve. If we could have the first slide. Thank you. So yeah, we're going to talk about the periodic evaluation of the groundwater sustainability plan and potential amendments to that plan. And I wanted to mention Helena is helping me coordinate preparation of the periodic evaluation and the amendments to the groundwater sustainability plan, so she's very involved in this. If we could go to the next slide. I wanted to start with reviewing some of the projects that were discussed in the 2020 GSP that was approved and where we're at on those. The recycled water project, we brought that back to the board some time ago. Basically was determined to be economically infeasible. The brackish water, the brackish water group had looked, at least the option they were looking at was reported to us that was determined to be infeasible. The LA County, in the GSP, we had an imported water project. We had two options in the GSP at that time. We had a project where we were going to investigate getting water from LA Department of Water and Power, doing an exchange of state water project with them, and then recharging the water that we could get from them into the groundwater basin. And that's been, the TAC looked at the ability to percolate water, concluded that there really wasn't sufficient evidence to show that you could even do that, that it would show up in the groundwater table. So that's been determined to be infeasible. And that next project is percolation applied to both our original recycled water project, because we had hoped to do a percolation project there, and to banking options that have been talked about. If we can't percolate the water, we can't do a banking project. So there just isn't information to support that that's a feasible thing to do. So where we're at is our imported water, our other imported water option, which is to get water from Antelope Valley East Kern Water Agency, has been determined to be feasible, and we, of course, are pursuing that. One of the other things that was in the GSP was our transient pool, and that's been enacted and it will lead to pumping reductions. And at the moment, we don't have any other new projects that we've been provided with to look at. So that's where we're at on those. If we could go to the next slide. So just as a review, this was in the GSP, but imported water is required because our domestic needs in the basin exceed the sustainable yield of the basin, even with the optimization of recycled water supplies with our domestic demand and what the Navy is currently pumping, it would exceed the supply that we have. And that we've determined that our AVEX supply is the feasible way to get imported water. If we go to the next slide. So I mentioned that one of the management actions or projects was banking in the basin. The percolation study, as I said, and the conclusion of the TAC was significant in determining we couldn't pursue that. We briefly looked at injection wells for the imported water project. We also had it in the recycled water project, the second version of the recycled water project, and injection was expensive, both to build the wells and to operate. And our current project, it includes providing water to the water district to do what's called in lieu recharge. If we provide them imported water, they can reduce their pumping. So they take imported water in lieu of pumping the groundwater, and that leaves the water in the basin. We had a project to look at pumping optimization, where to locate wells in the basin. Understand the water district hasn't pursued that. It'd be a great cost to move the wells around. We had a shallow well mitigation program in the GSP, and we've implemented that. This board's heard several applications for assistance in mitigating the impacts of the declining water levels from domestic well owners. We now have a shallow well consolidation project that is consolidating some of the shallow well users into the water district to again address the declining groundwater levels, and got a $3 million grant, and we're just at the beginning stages of that work now. We had mentioned the nature of the El Paso Basin in the GSP. There's, I think most people know, there's a fault that separates it from the main part of the basin. We've done some more work on that. It's briefly, we'll come to that, a little more discussion on that later. So that was some of the projects and management actions and where we're at on those. Talk now about the periodic evaluation of the GSP, the 2025 periodic evaluation. These periodic evaluations serve as an assessment of how well the groundwater sustainability plan is performing. It'll discuss modifications to our projects and actions that we've made along the way. And a periodic evaluation will determine whether we need to amend our GSP to accomplish sustainability of the basin. So it's the periodic evaluation that determines and leads to any amendments of the GSP if we need them. And our periodic evaluation must address the recommended corrective actions that DWR gave us when they approved our plan. They gave us a list of things they wanted to see addressed. These periodic evaluations are required every 5 years after the submittal of the initial groundwater sustainability plan, and anytime you want to amend your plan, you have to do a periodic evaluation to be able to amend it. So our periodic evaluation is due on January the 31st of next year. And this is an outline of the sections of the periodic evaluation. It'll have an executive summary. We'll have a discussion of new information that we've collected and reviewed. There'll be a review of our groundwater conditions relative to our sustainable management criteria that we established. Are we tracking the way that we had hoped to when we put together our management criteria? We'll talk about the status of the projects and management actions, talk about what's changed in those and what changes to the groundwater sustainability plan we might need to make because of changes in our projects. We'll talk about the basin setting and talk about this new data we've looked at. Is our understanding of the basin improved and different than it was when we did the GSP in 2020, and what changes would we want to make in the GSP to reflect that? We'll do an evaluation of our monitoring networks to see how well they're working for our criteria and whether we need to make any changes in that. Be a discussion of the GSA's authorities that they've enacted since since the GSP was approved, and any enforcement actions that are going on. And then it'll discuss our outreach engagement and coordination with other agencies. That'll include the recommendations we got from the PAC. And then we'll have a summary of any proposed or completed revisions to our GSP itself. So the plan amendment, that's how a GSP is changed. It's the process to formally revise the GSP if the GSA determines it's necessary. And there's no requirement to amend or update your GSP every year. There's a requirement to do the periodic evaluation, and if that shows you need to amend the GSP, then you do so. And And it's up to the board as to approve any of the amendments. And any amendments we do make in the GSP have to be in the periodic evaluation, and the periodic evaluation has to show why those amendments are needed. There's submittal requirements like we did with the original GSP. There's some public notification requirements. It has to be adopted by the board and then submitted to the California Department of Water Resources, along with the periodic evaluation. And if we make changes in our monitoring network, we have to go in and change on DWR's website where all that information gets posted, in addition to being posted on this Groundwater Authority's website. We have to go into the DWR's website and make changes in the monitoring that's shown there. So the periodic evaluation, this is some of the relationship between the periodic evaluation and potential amendments. We've got a list of the significant new information that's been collected. And by the way, that section of the periodic evaluation is out now. It's been sent to the TAC. It's been sent to everybody on the email distribution list that the GA has. It'll be put on the website here shortly. And it talks about water quality data we've collected. It talks about our review of the airborne electromagnetic data that was collected by the state and the other participants in that program. Some new data we have on groundwater-dependent ecosystems, new hydrogeologic data we have, and then the PAC's input on the communication and operations plan. Those are going to lead to, we think, suggestions that we amend the GSP in a number of places. A lot of that data, based on a lot of that data, we have updated, and we'll talk about this a little more, but updated our understanding of the hydrogeologic conceptual model and the groundwater model. We're trying to finalize a draft, a technical memo on potentially establishing the El Paso sub-area as a management area. Some of that technical data's gone through the technical modeling group that I'll talk about later. But we'll get that memo out to the TAC and to the public. We're going to suggest updating the water budgets as we've done an update on the hydrogeologic conceptual model, and amend our communication and outreach model. Some changes in the sustainability management criteria. Well, one of the recommended corrective actions as we had was we need to address a contingency plan. So the plan will need to be amended for that. And we'll update our discussions of projects and management actions, give our current schedule on the imported water project, update the status of the recycled water project. And when we finalized the 2020 GSP, we had a concept of a transient pool, but now we have one that's actually working, so we'll update the description and the schedule on the transient pool. So as I mentioned, our periodic evaluation is due January the 31st of next year. We're going to release set draft sections as we complete them. I mentioned we've got the first one out now, where we'll simultaneously work on revisions or amendments to the GSP itself and be releasing them at a later date. Let's go to the next slide. This is our schedule on the release of the sections of the periodic evaluation. As I mentioned, the first section was out a couple of weeks ago. This month, we're going to get out the section on monitoring networks, outreach and engagement, and the GSA's authorities and enforcements. Next month, we'll get out the discussion of groundwater conditions relative to our sustainable management criteria, followed in July with the updated basin, or the discussion of the information we have and our conclusions on the basin setting, including the new information. And then August would be the status of the projects and management actions. So we'll release all those for comments as drafts. We'll get the comments, revise them, put together a compiled, complete draft. We're shooting for around the beginning of September for that. And then we'll also be releasing draft sections of the plan amendments themselves over the summer also, get comments on those, and get a complete draft of the amended groundwater sustainability plan at the end of September, allow comments on both those complete drafts, and then our schedule now is to bring the final periodic evaluation to the board in November and the amended plan to the board in January, and be able to submit it by January the 31st. So we'll submit it to DWR. They'll issue a written assessment. They'll make a determination whether our periodic evaluation and our plan amendments are approved or incomplete or inadequate, just like they did with the original GSPs throughout the state. And they may issue new recommended corrective actions based on the changes we've made. So we've included in the presentation, which is on the website, the guidelines that DWR put out in October for the periodic evaluations and how to do plan amendments, and it also had guidelines on how to do annual reports. And then they had a fact sheet with some more information on these processes. With that, I'll turn to a little update on where we're at on our groundwater modeling activities. I think next month we've suggested we actually have the modelers come in and give a brief presentation on the model. So to go back again to the 2020 GSP, we had a modeling group that was an ad hoc committee of our technical advisory committee. It was a subgroup of it, and that included Tim Parker for the Water District, Stephen Bork representing the Navy, Eddie Teasdale representing Meadowbrook, Don Decker representing the domestic water users, Jenny Chapman with the Desert Research Institute, who constructed and ran the model, and then representatives from the water resource manager on that. This time in working on the model, and this is developed as we talked with the Navy about how to utilize the model and how to change the model, they required that we develop a configuration management plan. And it outlines how we will review new data, how we will make changes to the model. It required establishment of a technical modeling group to do those things and make recommendations on how to change the model. It required, some background in geology or modeling, hydrogeology. And our current group of the technical modeling group includes Donna Ogilvy with the Navy, who's here today, Susan Rabarski and Steve Bacon at Desert Research Institute, Director Lynch representing BLM, representatives of the Water Resource Manager, and Don Decker, has a lot of local knowledge on the geology, is a part of our management modeling group. We've been meeting since May to evaluate a lot of the new data that I referenced and discussed how to incorporate that into our model in a hydrogeologic conceptual model. We do have a revised model. It's been calibrated. We've come up with some modeling scenarios and trying to put the pumping files together for all that to do some evaluations of the basin, and I'll talk about what some of those are as we go forward. Go to the next one. Let's see. So our baseline scenario, we've actually run it already. We're working on putting the pumping files together for what we're calling the 2025 implementation pumping scenario. The baseline will actually model, where are we at now with what we've already implemented? It doesn't include things we haven't completely implemented yet. The baseline doesn't include imported water. The 2025 implementation pumping scenario, modeling scenario will include what's in the plan, what we plan to do, including the imported water project. And we've updated that. There were some recent court filings on how much some of the parties in the basin have pumped and what they would want to pump in the future. And we've utilized the Water District's Urban Water Management Plan to look at potential future pumping. And based on the results of this first implementation run, we'll come back to the technical modeling group and talk about what variations of the implementation plan we want to model to look at if there are things we need to address or change based on the results we're seeing. We can model those and get some information and bring it back to everyone to look at. We've developed an approach for how to look at the impact of climate change on the basin. We had a brief discussion of that in the 2020 GSP. One of, I think, DWR's recommended corrective action as we look at that further. So we haven't run the model runs, but the technical modeling group had a good discussion on what approach to use for that. And we're going to run a no groundwater authority. What if there was no management of the basin model run? And when we'll talk about those in a little more detail in the next slides. So the baseline, and this isn't all the pumping that's in this slide. We'll have another slide with more numbers in it on this scenario. But in general, it uses the Water District's Urban Water Management Plan. The Navy had asked us to use some time ago for planning purposes only, the value of 2,041 acre-feet a year for them. Back in the 2020 GSP, we developed an estimated domestic pumpers, and this is, this is representing single homes. That number doesn't include the shared wells and the mutual water companies. Their use of 832 acre-foot per year. We are going to include a growth rate for that for purposes of the baseline. We'll have the Inyo Kearns Community Service Districts rate, including some growth. And for most, things like Inyo Kern, people we have reported pumping on, we're going to use, the starting point will be the average pumping they've had the last 3 or 4 years, and that'll continue. Okay, so our no GA pumping, again, will follow the Water District's Urban Water Management Plan. The Navy recently, as I understand it, put forth that their federally reserved right is 6,503 acre-feet a year. We'll model that pumping in the basin. There were, in the recent court disclosures, information on future pumping by several of the parties. Searles Valley Mineral, Meadowbrook, Mojave, the city, the county, and Inyo Kern will incorporate those. There was some disclosure on small ag, and then we'll use, if we don't have specific information, we'll use what their recent pumping has been, and do the same with the mutuals and the co-ops, and use our number of 832, but escalating that going future for the single home wells in our no GA run. And we'll have a more complete set of numbers in a table later. Or maybe we're there. Next slide. So I mentioned we're going to do an implementation run. What's our modeling if we implement our plan? Again, Urban Water Management Plan for the Water District, the Navy's requested number. We're going to model that Searles Valley Mineral will continue to pump their wells at their recent amounts, but in the management plan, we're going to have imported water come in, so we're going to offset their pumping by in-lieuing water in the basin to get our total pumping down. And you'll see that in the numbers when we get to them. Domestic, I've already talked about that. I've talked about Inyo Kern, same assumptions for the mutuals, averages for the others, and then we'll have the transient pool finishing By 2026, it may go farther, but as they start to as they have diminishing quantities of transient pool water available, the economics of farming at some point might end for particular farmers. It might not be economic to do it anymore. So for modeling purposes, we're having the transient pool end in 2026, although people who have signed an agreement or are in the pool can use it up until 2040. Right, and well, as I mentioned, we'll have imported water coming in the year 2030, which is our current schedule. And then we've got a variation of the implementation run, which really just includes the only difference is Searles Valley Mineral. We're modeling what if they potentially have a pre-Navy right of 1,200 acre-feet a year, which they would continue to pump. And then these are the more complete numbers of what'll go into the no GA pumping, and this is what in the model will be what we'll model for pumping in the year 2040. So not this year or next year, but when we get to the year 2040, when we're supposed to reach sustainability, what would the pumping look like based on what information's been put out if we didn't have to get the basins to sustainability? And you can see at the bottom, as I say, some of the pumping's based on the disclosures to the court, and the bottom, the total's a large number, almost 44,000 acre-feet of pumping. So, and here's what the pumping looks like in our implementation plan. So, and this is showing, a different year. This is showing, next year. When we model next year, what are we going to be showing for pumping? And we're showing a little over 22,000 for next year. That will go up slightly. As I mentioned, we're providing some element of growth for some of the pumpers. It'll go up until we get imported water. Then for the modeling, we'll assume we're going to get enough imported water in the basin to be able to reduce the pumping down to the sustainable yield of 7650. Go to the next one. And in that implementation plan, this is what the 2030 pumping would look like. So the year we get imported water, we in lieu provide imported water to the water district, which then they can reduce their pumping down to help us get the basin to the 7650 as showed here. And that's what I have. Be glad to answer any questions.
Mr. Chairman, can I add a couple things?
Sure
real quick? Jeff, we did get comments from Nick Panzer, from Mr. Panzer, on a couple of RCAs, mostly to do with backup plans to import water. And I didn't know if you maybe just addressed where we're at on those right now, where we're thinking about those right now, because they're in it was in the early section of the update.
Yes, yeah. Nick sent us an email, and he pointed out that the DWR had a couple of recommended corrective actions. One of them is they wanted us to discuss a contingency plan. That is, what if we don't get imported water? What's our alternative? And then the second item was they wanted us to relook at how we established some of our sustainable management criteria. And we acknowledged in the plan we didn't set some of the criteria on water quality at some of the locations because we didn't have enough data, but we can address that now. We've collected data. But yes, when we were going to, when are we going to and make statements that those are certainly the contingency plan might be a topic of quite a bit of discussion, so it'd be good to start on that. So we got back to him, informed him what section of our periodic evaluation each one of those items is in. And said, we'll be coordinating when we start the discussions on that.
Good. Thanks, Jeff. Mm-hmm. Just a couple other things that I noted going through that I think might help some of the audience. When Jeff talked about the periodic evaluation, just so everybody knows, because I'm not sure everybody's getting all the information, but originally, this was originally when we did the GSP, this was considered to be a 5-year update. That's what it was called, and that's what we had planned on doing, and you probably heard people talk about that. DWR changed that about a year ago, Jeff? Less than a year ago?
Oh, much less than a year ago.
Yeah, kind of short notice for us, but basically changed that, and that's where you're hearing new language called the periodic evaluation and potential plan amendments. And that's why you're seeing a different language. Says it doesn't really, they don't really require an update to the plan every 5 years, but they do require a periodic evaluation at least every 5 years. That's a periodic evaluation of your existing plan, which means you're not really updating the whole plan. You're just periodically evaluating where you're at on that plan. So I want to make that clarification. Also, as Jeff walked through the periodic evaluation, he mentioned the monitoring networks, and I want to let people know a little more information than you really need, but during these last couple of wet years, DWR did make a request to this to Groundwater Authority to add some additional groundwater monitoring based upon the rain we received and what the reactions to the wells might be. Board approved that, and we did implement that, so we did follow up on DWR comments. This was during the process of our operations. So that's pretty good information. And then on the potential GSP amendments, one of the areas we've looked at, and we haven't brought to the board yet, but we've got a pretty good idea where we're going at it, with it, is the Rose Valley area, which is subsurface inflow into the basin. And what we've tentatively determined is going to go through the TAC first before it comes to the board, but we've tentatively concluded up there that this is a very significant, important subsurface flow to the basin. Comments were received from the public and certainly from the TAC that as important as that subsurface flow is to the basin, should we not maybe extend our GSA boundaries to cover that area so we can help manage that area, make sure that we maintain that inflow. So far, our evaluation indicates that there is a management plan up there. Inyo County is very active up there. And right now, our approach tentatively, it'll go to the board eventually and the TAC. Our approach tentatively is to work with the existing management structure and provide periodic updates back to the board where they're at on that. So we can basically make sure that inflow, subsurface flow to the basin is uninterrupted without having to go through a process of bringing it into our plan. So those are just some things I wanted to add. And I think now we're open for questions, discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
I have a comment, actually a letter I'd like to read from our board. It's addressed to Mr. Chairman Peters. It says, the Indian Wells Valley Water District formally submits the following 2 documents for review and consideration by the Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Authority. These documents will also be submitted to the Department of Water Resources via the DWR Sigma portal. These documents provide new and updated science and cost analysis relevant to the attainment of groundwater basin sustainability in the Indian Wells Valley pursuant to the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. The 2 documents are as follow. Technical Working Group Assessment of Groundwater Storage for the Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Basin. Number 2, Clean Energy Capital Cost Analysis, Proposed Imported Pipeline Project. It should be noted that this is the same assessment of groundwater storage that was part of the district's court filings requested in a Phase 1 trial. So the IWVGA has been in receipt of this report for over 90 days. The district previously provided the IWVGA with a draft of a second document, Clean Energy Capital Cost Analysis, nearly a month ago on May 15, 2024. At that time, the district requested that the IWVGA provide the district with any feedback on the cost analysis. The district hoped to incorporate the IWVGA's input into Clean Energy Capital's final analysis. Unfortunately, to date, the district has not received any feedback from the IWVGA. This data is submitted in response to IWVGA's formal request for such information to be delivered at its regular board meeting on June 12, 2024. With the submission of this data, the district formally requests that the IWVGA review, consider, and incorporate the enclosed as part of the IWVGA's 5-year GSP update. To meet the IWVGA's stated submission date, these studies represent the district's best estimates as of this date, but are subject to minor modification as we validate the data. The district is also working to coordinate the release of a third report, the Technical Working Group Initial Assessment of Safe Yield for the Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Basin. The Safe Yield Assessment should be submitted to the IWVGA for consideration in the 5-year GSP update shortly. The district and its consultants who prepared these reports can be made available to answer questions or provide context to the attached documents to allow the best science, technical data, and analysis to be used in achieving sustainability in the Indian Wells Valley. These documents may also be found on the district's website at IndianWellsValleyWaterDistrict.com. Or if you have any further questions, do not hesitate to contact George Curl or Ron Kaczynski. Ron's cell phone number is listed, and we look forward to hearing from you and working with you, and it's signed by David St. Amand, the Vice President. So here is the letter, and then here are the 2 reports. And if we could submit those, that
wanna
way
take
they're
those soon?
submitted.
The board can
And then
actually
hopefully
get a
we
chance
have
to
the
look at
third
it.
one coming very quickly. The district is on board with getting that released as quick as possible.
Mr. Chairman?
They are going to be sent electronically also. Yeah. Yeah, they will
Mr.
be.
Johnson?
If I could ask a question?
Yes,
to
sir.
Director Griffin? Just a quick question. So far on the evaluation of cost that was done, so far we've only gotten a presentation. Is there a written report that we haven't gotten yet?
There was one, the final report was presented to us on Monday night at the meeting, and that's why I invited everybody tonight. If anybody came, it would have been good to have the attendance, but the final report is there, and it will also be sent electronically too.
Appreciate that, thank you.
Okay.
That'll make it a lot easier.
Yeah.
It's easier to go through the report than the PowerPoint.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay, seeing none, we will go to public comment. Any members of the public like to speak on this item?
Good afternoon. I'm Don Decker, for the record. The TMG has met twice, on the 4th, 6/4, and 5/17. And both times, one of the topic areas was the domestic well owner, the shallow well, domestic well owner consumption, 832 acre feet per year, has been a number that goes back in time to the creation of the GSP. And I have protested that number over and over again, not just words, but actually, how you get other higher numbers. It's off by a factor of roughly 2. And in the overall budget, it may not be a terribly serious error. However, to the domestic well owners, it's lifeblood. And it's important to document what's actually happening now, not, what happens in the future with the court. Of course, we don't know. The one thing that I did protest and was in fact accepted by Stetson was the 1% growth for the domestic well owner community and for Inyakern CSD and for the mutual co-op group. We all realize, of course, that the groundwater is severely limited, and we will not see any further growth past some point in time, maybe 2030. But it's important to get started on an equal footing with the water district, and that was recognized and will be undertaken and incorporated. But the 832 still remains. There are 2 problems that lead to that lower number. It's been assumed that the inside consumption is the same in the Ridgecrest City and in the rural area, which is half an acre foot inside water consumption and a half an acre foot outside. But the rural outside consumption is invariably larger because of the need for landscape trees and large shrubs to provide essentially a screen for sun and wind. And I see I've reached my 3-minute point. However, I submit to you, I'm not just a member of the public, I'm also your one and only TAC member that's still standing. Maybe not for long. The two areas where a mistake has been made, one of them is that outside number needs to be increased by a small amount, which when you take it over the total number of wells amounts to something. The other is an error that Stetson has made, and it's a failure to understand the four-way split, the four-way sharing of a well. About a quarter of the total number of wells that involved, the 832, about a quarter of that number is actually a four-way split. And those wells are not the same as the wells that are ordinarily assumed to be in that group. The water is going to four separate entities that are de minimis, each one of them de minimis, so that the total water production out of that four-way split well can easily be 4 times what it is in the wells for the remainder of that 832. I've done some calculations, and they're in the paper that I've given to all of you. For the audience, I will just very briefly go through it. If you take the Todd 836 well, which is a little larger than 832, and expand it to 840, to account for the new wells since 2014, there are 210 shared wells and 630 single-party wells. That's for 1/4 of the total number being shared. You can easily calculate that even using the 1 acre foot for the total consumption, you get 1470 acre feet per year. It's almost twice what the 832 is. And if you use a more realistic outside consumption, you get something like 1918. And what I'm saying is that we've given you, I think, ample evidence that the number is larger, not just my numbers, but there have been 2 studies that both show significantly larger consumption. The Todd report, and there's another very valuable report that was done by Tetra Tech in 2003, I think. So I submit to you that time is slipping by all of us, and the time to fix things that are obviously not right is basically now. I've heard over and over that it's too hard to do, but as time goes by, it doesn't get any easier. It gets hard because you've got to redo modeling to some extent, but the numbers that we're talking about changing are not that large in the overall situation. And not only that, the small wells are distributed almost uniformly all over the basin. So it won't affect the local calculations to any significant degree. That's what I've got.
Thank you, Mr. Decker. Steve, is there any comment on that as far as as what those calculations look like, or?
Oh, there we go. Yes, that's all real good information. Jeff and I had a little discussion on the way up, because we got some of that information from Don already. We're going to take it back and look at it. I mean, Don is a huge resource to this valley and a huge resource to the Groundwater Authority and to Stetson. So yes, we're going to take a look at those numbers and reply to Don too, so absolutely.
Perfect, thank you, sir. Okay, next speaker, please.
Chairman, if I can add something for a moment.
Sure thing.
What Don is bringing up today is something that we shouldn't put lightly here. His comment essentially is we are using 1 acre foot per well in our calculations for our GSP, sustainable yield, et cetera. And that is true. But under the GSP and under our limits of Sigma, we have to allow 2 acre foot for those wells. This is why it is so important for de minimis wells to be involved in the adjudication. We are talking over 20% of the sustainable yield going to a group that has 0 representation at this moment and represents almost 900 homes. We very easily could all agree in the adjudication that 2 acre foot is going to be provided to them, but while the governmental agencies are willing to do that, excluding the water district, who, while a governmental agency is not with the rest of us, being the Navy, the city, county, and the other counties on the GA and the GA, we don't have that. We could, but we don't. And they're not going to have representation. Their rights will be determined. And we're talking about 900 homes, families in 900 homes, that have right now no representation in the adjudication, and I think that's very worrisome.
Okay, good point, thank you.
Actually, Mr. Hall, the Todd report with, satellite survey of the basin counted 1,600 homes. And more recent numbers that I've seen are closer to 1,700. That's why 800 is such a small number. We're spreading this over, twice as many homes, and the 1 acre foot per household is just ridiculously small.
Yeah, thank you. You're correct. I got the number wrong, but to put that into now perspective of people, if you assume average 3 per home, we're at, 5,000 people in a basin that has 30 outside of that. So it's
Absolutely.
very troubling.
Absolutely, thank you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, if I can make one comment
Sure,
about
then
the
we need
topic,
to continue.
and we need to further discuss it with Mr. Decker, but he was right. The Todd report talked about 1,600 homes, and we were talking about 832 what we've called domestic, which are the single home wells. In all those pumping tables I showed you, there's another category of co-ops and mutual, and that's where we believe a lot of the additional homes that have been referenced are counted there, but we need to sit down and have that discussion further. We've discussed it some, we need to discuss it some more.
Perfect, thank you for making that distinction. But Mr. Decker, we need to continue the discussion and make sure we hear from the public, so.
I understand.
As you said,
Or one
as a.
short comment.
Okay, but that's it after this, please. We need to continue the discussion.
Understand. The 832 supposedly incorporates the four-way well community. And the mutual and domestic, mutual and co-op is a completely separate thing and is on the charts as a separate item. The four-way split people are de minimis by Sigma statement.
Thank you. Okay, any other public speakers on this item?
Judy Decker. I realize your periodic evaluation is all about water consumption, but your GSP talks about other things also. And one of the things it talks about is fallowing land. You have nothing in this document about that, yet you do discuss the ending of the transient pool water user category. Fallowing land is, having a plan for fallowing land in this valley is essential. It's been brought up multiple times by myself, but also by the Navy. And it's past time to start working on developing that plan. I hope and pray you are not thinking of leaving the issue of doing that to the property owner. The other thing I have to say is this is supposed to be a workshop, not this part of it anyway, not a formal board public interaction. And so it seems like a person ought to be able to talk for as long as they feel it is necessary. And I have some things to say about what was written in your draft plan. I'm glad it's a draft. You need to go back and take a look at it. And in the beginning where you list things, you need to define what they are. People who have perhaps just moved to this community and purchased a house with a private well are going to look at that and they're going to wonder what El Paso means. Does that mean El Paso, Texas? You need to define RCAs. Take a closer look at your plan and what it says and read it from the perspective of someone who really doesn't know anything, because the objective, I thought, was to get the public involved here. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next speaker, please. Okay, we're going to go to the phones. Go ahead, caller.
Yes, this is Renee Westelos. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I have several questions. The first one being those two charts, number 21 and 22, or I guess they're slides 21 and 22. Are these allocation charts? And if they are, the one for 2030 pumping is deeply disturbing for the water district because that's less than half of their current allocation. Right now, the water district gets $43.90, and this is down to $1,186. So I'd like an explanation, because the water rate payers that are all, over 10,000 people are going to have to pay huge amounts for water, and I don't see how it's going to be affordable. And then the second question I have is in slide 21. Why is the domestic water use lumped in with the industrial use of Searles Valley Mineral? In the past, when you've done allocation charts, you've always singled out the Trona domestic use, which I think is around 213 acre feet a year. And I think I guess those are all my questions right now.
Okay, thank you, Renee. Well, I'll call on Mr. Helsley to see if we can get you some answers for that.
Yes, to Renee's first question, these are not allocation charts. These are what we propose to put in for pumping for these entities for purposes of groundwater modeling. Why these numbers are the way they are has to do with our policies and our projects. We put Searles Valley Mineral and Trona together because they're all pumped out of the same wells. When we put it in the model, it doesn't know the difference because they're using the same wells to serve both of those purposes. So this is, and the water district in the 2030 pumping has shown such a low number, not because of anything to do with allocations, but because to get the basin imbalance, we're assuming they would use imported water, and would be the balance that they would pump. And we want to model what that looks like, what the impacts on groundwater levels are, if that were the case.
Great, thank you. Okay, next caller, go ahead. Go ahead, caller.
Yes, this is Mike Neal. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Okay, with respect to this plan, what I believe we're not seeing, and I got called out, so part of the report, major part of the presentation, actually. But in any case, the document funded by this group of 4 to 5 different organizations slash private entities, and employing several different consultants, which has been available on the Water District website for some time regarding the water and storage in the basin, which document is documenting with data taken, and very recent data in some cases, that the basin has way more water and storage than it's been held to in the GSP to date. And they've also put out, just in kind of press release form, that the recharge in the basin is almost twice what has been reported in years past. These being proven to be fact, which is, I'm going to have a hard time seeing how they can be disproven or refuted. It's going to be a game changer to the whole approach that's going to be taken to deal with the water in the basin and the pumping demands of various users, and all things connected to that. So that needs to be looked at without a slanted eye, and I'm afraid to say that in some cases I don't have a lot of trust in the GA to not just hold to their original position, because they have tenaciously done so in the past. But the people in the valley are going to be made aware of this, and they're the ones who need to make a hue and cry to have this new data taken into account, and a better approach than bringing upon us a economy-crippling pipeline that's going to cost people so much for water, they're just not going to want to live here. We don't need that, and I think it's going to be proven to be totally unnecessary. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Next caller, please. Go ahead, caller.
Yes, this is Renee West.
Okay, good. Yeah, go ahead, Renee.
Okay. I gotta mute my TV. Hold on. As far as these not being allocation charts, referring back to 21 and 22, then why are they, on slide 22, why are they going to the natural recharge rate? Of 76.50 on the bottom.
Chairman, if I can add a more layman's perspective than our engineers for Renee. Sure. Renee, the modeling will look at wells and how the water comes out of a particular well. So when you look at Searles Valley Mineral and Trona, they're using one well. The water coming out of that well might be going to two different entities, or kind of two different entities, a domestic supply and their industrial supply, but it's one well and the water's coming out of that one well. So this is actually reflecting of pumping from particular wells. So 76.50 is because that's how much will be pumped out of the basin from these wells, and this is what particular wells will be pumping. It's not an allocation chart of anybody's water right, or we don't even give water rights out. We're giving allocations of pumping rights, but that is not what this is either. This is an estimation based on what we currently have with an import supply coming in of where water will be pumped from the basin, and where you pump water from the basin affects how the basin reacts. One of the things you've heard about is an optimization plan of pumping. one thing that we've heard about repeatedly in leading up to the GSP, and Meadowbrook said it all the time, was that the solution was to modify all of the water district's pumping, because the water district's creating a pumping depression, and if we spread that pumping out, that would cure the basin's ills. You got to model that by moving the wells to different areas, and that's what this reflects. It just reflects the amount of water. Now, if you're looking at the water district slide at 1186, that is what they would pump out of the ground. They would actually be using closer to 6, but that is going to be from the import supply. They will be getting that other additional water. And some of that is what's called in lieu recharge, which is they will be using import supply so that Searles Valley can pull water out of a well. Does that, I hope I've made it a little bit less engineering.
Yeah, that's better explanation. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other callers? Okay, anybody else that hasn't spoken yet that would like to share their thoughts? Or anybody that has spoken already that would like to share anything else or get any clarification? Okay, not seeing any. I'll check back in with the board one more time. Any questions or comments from the board? Okay, not seeing any. That will take us to item number 10, and that's the Water Resource Manager's report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, everybody, for the comments and stuff. Great job, Jeff. Thanks. I'll try to make this quick. It's written as part of the board packet. There's not a whole lot new, although we did have something new today. April reported that if you look under the grant funding update, one of our first items is reimbursement of our retention for the Prop 1 and 68 funds, funding. And we did receive that today. So we can change that one to, we're waiting on it. Over 200,000 was received today, so we're good there. You'll see that for invoice 3, 4, 5, and 6, payments were received. We reported at the last meeting. That's all good. We've got invoice number 7 that is was submitted on May 31st. So we're waiting on that. That's for another almost $600,000. So things are good there. The consolidation, the urban drought relief, community drought relief program update. As you know, everybody, we've reported that the Groundwater Authority did receive a grant of about $3.35 million. We're working on that. We've got several consolidation programs and projects going that we're looking at. Some have come to the board. Some things have been authorized by the board. There was a mention by one of the callers about the fractured relationship between Groundwater Authority and the water district. I'll just say, you know, we're in working together with the staff, we're trying to cement that or put some spackle in that fracture, whatever we're going to call it. But we are working on that relationship, working together with the water district on some of their consolidation projects that we may be able to help with. Either with staffing or review or possibly funding or extending their consolidation, but we're working closely on at least 2 projects, and then we have several others. So that's going forward. For the pipeline project, in writing, we talk about the imported water pipeline design services. There's a list of things that have been accomplished since the last time we reported. And at the end, there's the next steps, what's coming up. Same thing, we do the same thing for the environmental services, a list of things that have been accomplished, and then at the end is next steps, where we're going. Lastly, there's the right-of-way services, right-of-way, to provide right-of-way for the pipeline. The accomplishments are there, and then at the end, we're due a final right-of-way acquisition plan this month. So we haven't got it yet, but we'll be looking for that. Submittals to DWR. The draft initial study is due September 1st, toward the fall of this year, so that's coming up. We're good there. We do continuously coordinate with DWR on updates to the funding program and updates to the project. That happens pretty much on a monthly basis. There is a program in place that we're working on with the Corps of Engineers as part of the grant funding that we are looking for, or that we're getting. that involves the Corps providing in-kind services. They can't provide money, but they can provide in-kind services. So we're still working on that. We have projects that we've identified that are under review by the Corps. At the point the Corps agrees to projects that they can undertake as in-kind services to reduce some of the efforts and cost that are being burdened by, by the Groundwater Authority, as soon as we can get communication with the Corps, we will execute an agreement and get the Corps started on those projects. Just as I've said this before, but just those who haven't heard, some of the issues in trying to get the projects identified with the Corps is under this implementation grant that we have right now with the pipeline project, we're going fast. Provost and Pritchard are going fast. We're all going fast. And as some of you may know, the Corps does not go very fast. And so we've got to identify projects that they can work on that have endpoints that are out far enough that they actually do us some good when they get there, because otherwise it doesn't make much sense for them to work on. So we're trying to identify projects that are appropriate for them to work on and still provide a benefit to us. So that's what we're involved with. There is a review of the shallow well mitigation program on the projects that we have included. I've got a written review of the periodic evaluation and the amendment for the GSP. We just did that, don't need anything there. Annual report, kind of interesting. For the first time, we did submit the annual report on time, that's all good. We actually, on May 24th, DWR did send the Groundwater Authority a letter accepting the 2023 annual report. As submitted and stated, the report largely satisfies the requirements of the GSP regulations. So normally we didn't hear anything on our annual reports. This year we actually got a letter saying that they looked at it and everything looks fine. So that's all good. There's been reports on the technical monitoring group and the groundwater modeling that we're doing, so that's all good. And I did provide a short report on Rose Valley, what we're doing there. We have collected the data, and we have developed a draft technical memorandum on the LADWP releases that we had this year and last year. So it's an internal review right now. It will go to the TAC, and then we'll bring it to the board. So I think that's the end of my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Any questions or comments from the board?
Just a quick comment on the Rose Valley. So the data, are you talking about, previously you mentioned that the Rose Valley flow was a important, aspect, and so is this data going to show and reflect some of that?
It will show that, but not necessarily. I don't know what we're doing there. We are separately. We are working on a second monitoring well for Rose Valley. Mm-hmm. Those monitoring wells will be used to provide a better estimate of the subsurface flow. We are including the subsurface flow in our GSP, in our water balance for the basin. So that's what we're doing there. This other work that we're doing was related to the releases by Los Angeles Aqueduct, from the emergency releases they made. And the evaluation was centered around whether or not we could track the water and where the water went. And we did do two things. We had a monitoring network that we put together and ran through the TAC to make sure everybody would agree on where the monitoring network would be for both water levels and water quality. We took water quality samples of the aqueduct. We have water quality samples of the basin. So the effort there is to identify whether or not we can see an impact to the wells that we're monitoring from the releases, to see whether we see any, and this lends itself more to replenishment capabilities, groundwater replenishment capabilities. So far, it's not real good what we're seeing. We see some reaction in these wells, but even with the water quality, it's impossible to identify whether or not the reaction we're seeing is because of direct penetration from the rainfall or whether it's from the releases. But as I mentioned, the technical memorandum is being reviewed right now, and it will go through the TAC before we'll bring it to the board. Okay.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
Is John Vallejo here? It's a good time.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to, on a related note, not sure if Stetson's aware, the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power just filed a notice of exemption for its intention to perform pumping tests in the Rose Valley area to determine what the substrate's like, what what the groundwater retention and recovery could be like if they were to develop a groundwater banking project down there. So that test is actually expected to move forward within the next few weeks. They have their own monitoring plan for that test, but it's probably something that you want to take a closer look at to see what they're doing and how that does or doesn't align with the monitoring network that Stetson's already aware of and has used.
No, that's very good information, Director Vallejo. Absolutely want to get more information. I'm sure the information we've collected from the releases will be helpful to them too. So we probably ought to share our technical memorandum, but if we can get information on that, yeah, absolutely be very helpful.
Thank you, Director Vallejo. Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, I'll go to the public for any questions or comments on the Water Resource Manager's report. Okay, seeing none, that'll take us to item number 11, and that's the General Manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a brief report. First, you don't have the entire financials for May this month. Apologize for that. We ran into some issues trying to reconcile our expense report with the county's report. No real problems, just it looks like maybe some items were crossed over among months. So while we sort that out, we'll plan to have the updated financials for you at our next meeting. And what you do have is the cash balance statement, cash balance report. And I think the good news there is it does reflect those grant reimbursement payments, over $2.5 million that we received last month. So, so we can see that our cash balance is definitely looking up from where it has been. Nothing reportable on the progress on communications and engagement plan. We do have a report in our packet, though, from Capitol Corps and the work they've been doing. I think Todd Tatum is on the line. He can add to it. I'll steal a little of his thunder. Looks like the biggest news in that report is the inclusion of our project on the Senate version of the WRDA bill, Water Resources Development Act, at least so far, which passed through committee. Todd, want to add anything?
You just stole my thunder, Carol.
Sorry.
Yep. But I will add that the House of Representatives have not introduced their version of the WRDA 24, but they're expected to shortly. So it could even happen while Mike and Jeff are in DC. As you know, they're there right now. And we'll let you know when that does happen.
Awesome. So I think that's it for me.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from the board on the General Manager's report? Okay, not seeing any. We will go to public comment. Any members of the public that would like to comment on the General Manager's report? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to the phones. Oh, do we have a caller there? Go ahead, caller.
Yes, this is Renee.
Yeah, we can hear you, Renee.
Yes, this is Renee Westerlusk. I want to congratulate Capitol Corps for getting all this progress made on the pipeline and all the grants and everything. I just want to say thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Renee. Any other questions, comments from the public? Okay, not seeing any. That takes us to the conclusion of the meeting. Our next meeting will be held July 10th, 2024. And without objection, we're adjourned.